Hey everyone, welcome to podcast number 6. Topics to be covered today are the Jeffersonian Revolution, which includes the following: the election of 1800, the presidency of good old Thomas Jefferson, and the Virginia dynasty. So basically the presidencies of Madison and Monroe, focusing on the War of 1812 and the era of good feeling. So let's get this party started. Okay. Election of 1800 is one of probably the most important elections in American history, mainly because it sets an important precedent, and that is it sets the precedent that when you lose an election, step down and be graceful about it. Don't try to hold on to power. Don't pull a Vladimir Putin or whatever. Just go down. Wish the winner congratulations and move on. Okay, this is an election where we see political parties popping up once again. We have the Federalists versus the Democratic Republicans, and you really need to know the differences between these guys. Okay, the Federalists are all about a strong national government. They want to support businesses. They feel like the people that are well educated and wealthy should kind of run the show. They don't really trust the quote-unquote common man or the average American. They feel like the common man, I guess, would make the wrong decisions for the most part. Jefferson's Democratic Republicans are the complete opposite. They're much more of a states' rights kind of people. They believe that the government that governs least, governs best. I had that backwards. The government that governs best governs least. Okay. They're all about agriculture instead of business in the cities. They believe in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. And for the most part, they believe tariffs are bad because it hurts the farmers. Okay. So anyways, you need to know the differences in these two parties. Here's a great little graphic showing John Adams, the Federalist, and Thomas Jefferson, the Democratic Republican. And just a real quick bullet by bullet point here on what it is these dudes believe. All right. So anyways, Adams loses the election to Jefferson. Okay. And when Jefferson wins the election of 1800, he calls it the Jeffersonian Revolution, or he calls it the Revolution of 1800. And he calls it the Revolution of 1800 because he feels like, Washington and Adams have taken the country away from the principles of the American Revolution. Okay, and part of the reason he thinks this is because he doesn't like the fact that we're cozying up to Great Britain. He doesn't like the fact that we're not helping out the French people in the French Revolution. He thinks we're on the wrong side of that revolution. Okay. He also is very much against John Adams when he signs the Alien and Sedition Acts. He feels like those trampled the First Amendment rights. Okay, so he feels that his victory is putting America back on the course of what the revolution was kind of all about. Okay, other kind of things about the election of 1800 that should be mentioned is Jefferson is called the first Negro president, not because he's black, obviously, and not because of the Sally Hemings scandal, even though that was brought up. He's called the Negro president because without the Three-Fifths Compromise, he probably doesn't win, because the Three-Fifths Compromise obviously really kind of boosted the electoral power of those southern states. Okay, so it's very interesting to kind of look at that. Okay, so anyways, when Jefferson becomes president, these are kind of his main goals. You can read them yourself, but basically he wants a small government to kind of be enforced here. Okay, one of the annoying things for Jefferson is that when John Adams leaves office, he makes a bunch of judicial appointments. Okay, he basically stacks the federal courts with Federalists. Now Jefferson is successful in getting rid of a lot of these guys, but the one guy he's not able to get rid of, and who will be a thorn in his side, and future Democrats in the future, is John Marshall. So Adams is able to appoint John Marshall as the Chief Justice, and this guy, for decades, will basically help shape the country. He has many landmark decisions that come through the early 1800s. Probably the most important one is Marbury versus Madison, which gives the Supreme Court the right of judicial review, basically allowing them to say what is constitutional and what is not constitutional. Foreign policy-wise, Jefferson's really the first American president that has to go and send our military out to take care of business, which they successfully do. We have to take on the Barbary pirates of the Mediterranean, and sometimes you just can't make this stuff up. But anyways, you have the Barbary states in North Africa here. They were like protectorates of the Ottoman Empire. And basically the way they rolled is they would basically capture ships and ransom off sailors to countries. And if you didn't want the Barbary pirates to take your ships, you would just have to pay them an annual tribute, and they would leave you alone. So the Americans obviously couldn't afford that because they're a new nation, somewhat poor. And so we have to actually go and fight for our protection. So the American Navy and the American Marine Corps, which at this time are nothing to write home about, go and successfully prosecute a war against the Barbary pirates and get them to basically leave us alone. So it is a successful successful little war for the United States. Okay, obviously Jefferson is very well known for the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. It accounts for 22% of modern America. Many of those Great Plains states and parts of those mountain states, Louisiana, Port of New Orleans, obviously incredibly important there. It's important to note, too, that kind of playing what-if history here, you talk about John Adams and you talk about what kind of president he was. The fact that John Adams kept us out of war with France is incredibly important, because if we would have went to war with France, in 1800 or so, would there be any possibility of us getting the Louisiana Purchase from the French? I don't think so. And we all know what happens to Napoleon. Napoleon eventually does lose his quest to become the kind of the emperor of Europe, so to speak. And when Napoleon loses, if the French still have the Louisiana Purchase, do the British take it from them? Who gets that land? Because I'm sure the French would have had to give it up. And if the British had taken it over, what would have happened to American westward expansion? Would we have been able to expand westward? It's kind of a great kind of what-if kind of history here. But anyways, as I kind of previously mentioned, these Napoleonic Wars are spilling over into America again. It's getting us pulled in. We trade with both the French and the British. And so both of these countries are going to be kind of disrespectful to the United States and our merchant ships and our Navy. The British passed the Orders of Council, which forbid trade with the French. Napoleon orders similar orders about all ships heading to Great Britain. So now we're getting tied up once again in this European conflict here. The British especially are annoying because they are following this policy of impressment, where they will stop American ships and basically kidnap American sailors. Mainly people that they feel have deserted in the past, but they're American sailors, they're American citizens, and around 6,000 Americans are taken into the British Navy in that 3-year period there. So anyways, that's obviously a major issue. Jefferson, like the previous two presidents, though, knows that it's not a good idea to get into war just yet with the British or the French here. And so he's going to have to take alternative measures to, protect American interest. And so he relies on the Embargo Act of 1807, which basically is when the U.S. voluntarily stops trading with the rest of the world. The idea is that these other countries will realize that they need U.S. products. In the end, basically, what it does is just really hurts the American economy, and the British and French are really not that hurt by it. Also, it makes New England furious with Jefferson and the Democrats, and they actually threaten secession. Okay, the only silver lining to Jefferson's Embargo Act is that there is some American industry that begins to pop up as a result of this embargo. And then you have the War of 1812 happening, and once again, you have to have American industry now has to meet the needs of the American economy, whereas before we relied on Europe for a lot of our industrial needs. And so this is kind of the beginning of that first industrial revolution within the United States here. So anyways, Jefferson leaves office in 1809, I believe, and his successor, his protege James Madison, takes over. James Madison, obviously a very important American, father of the Constitution, all that good stuff. But he becomes president in a period of a lot of tension. There's a lot of anger towards the British. Many of these Warhawks, these aggressive politicians from the South and the West, are basically eager to go to war with the British for a couple reasons. Number one, they believe that the British trade restrictions on them are hurting the farmers. There's also this belief that the British are arming Native Americans and then having those Native Americans attack American settlers. And also this issue of impressment is kind of a disgrace and a major dishonor to the United States of America. And so these guys are going to want some payback. Okay. So anyways, the War of 1812 is fought. A couple things to point out. We try to invade Canada for the second time, and it fails. There's some naval battles fought in the Great Lakes, which is kind of cool. Washington, D.C. is burned to the ground. And our greatest victory comes at the Battle of New Orleans, which is actually fought 2 weeks after the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the war, was signed. So kind of interesting there. And, of course, our national anthem comes as a result of that war. Other results of the War of 1812, the death of the Federalist Party. The Federalists meet at a convention known as the Hartford Convention, and they basically look petty, they look un-American, and there's even talk of secession. And so the Federalist Party becomes pretty discredited here, and they'll never be a serious party again, which leads into the era of good feelings with basically a one-party state. I think America gets a little bit of respect from the rest of the world, showing that they stood up to the British, and did win some important victories here. America definitely comes out of the war feeling good about themselves. There is a level of nationalism there. Industry picks up. We have war heroes that will become presidents, and as I already mentioned, the Star-Spangled Banner is most definitely an important result of that war. Okay, but I just mentioned nationalism. One of the most important effects of the War of 1812 and the Embargo Act, for that matter, is that America has to start relying on itself for industry. Okay, we have to start industrializing, getting a textile industry set up, and we see Henry Clay, who's someone you have to know. Henry Clay promotes something called the American system, and what the American system basically is going to do is it's going to promote the American economy, to basically create a strong banking system so that businesses can expand. He wants to improve infrastructure with canals and roads to unite the country and make it easier to transport goods to market. And he's also going to put protective tariffs to protect the infant American industry. And these protective tariffs, guys, are going to lead to a lot of conflict, prior to the Civil War, because while tariffs will help the North, tariffs are going to hurt the South. Okay, so there's a lot of regional interest to consider here when you talk about tariffs. Okay, but anyways, when James Monroe follows Madison, he continues the Virginia dynasty. You look at our first 5 presidents, 4 of them are from Virginia. Adams is the only one that isn't. But basically, Monroe wins. He wins big, and it appears the Federalists are dead. And so this is the era of good feelings, referring to this period of time where there's a small measure of prosperity, but basically there's this one-party state. There's very little partisan resistance to Monroe. He's incredibly popular, and I guess if you think about it, if there is only one party around right now, think about how all the news would go away about this president did this or that president did that. All the partisan bickering that we typically see. If that wasn't around, how different the news would be, so to speak. So, anyways, moving on. As America grows, and you can see in this map here, as America continues to grow, slavery begins to pop up. Now, the Founding Fathers originally didn't want to talk a lot about slavery because they felt that it would rip the country apart and we could never unify if slavery was too much of an issue. But as we expand, slavery becomes an issue. And the main issue at first is maintaining a balance. The South obviously was very concerned that if there was not a balance in the Senate between slave states and free states, that their rights as slaveholders would be in danger. Okay, so as the country expanded, this was always an issue. And the first compromise that allows us to postpone a civil war is the Missouri Compromise. And so if you look on the map there, Missouri is allowed to enter as a slave state, and Maine is allowed to enter as a free state, and that maintains the balance. So if you look here, here's some more stuff on the Compromise of 1820. The importance here, though, is that according to the Missouri Compromise, slavery from now on is banned south of the Missouri border. And so if you just look at the map there, there's clearly more territory north of that line than south of that line. And so as the country continues to expand westward, slavery will become boxed in, and the North will eventually outnumber those southern states. So kind of foreshadows what is about to come. But for a couple of decades, the Missouri Compromise does seem to work, where you kind of have, a free state enter the Union, a slave state enter the Union, and that does work for several decades. But eventually, it's going to run out, and it's not going to work. Okay. So, anyways, moving on. There's also a fair amount of judicial nationalism going on. So we have this martial court making some very important decisions, and I'm not going to read those out to you. You can pause it if you want to look at it. We also see very aggressive foreign policy for the United States for the first time. We see us kind of jumping into the world scene, so to speak, make an important treaty with the British, giving us rights to some important fisheries. We agree to joint occupation with the British to Oregon Territory for about 10 years. We also have Andrew Jackson kind of acting on his own here and invades Florida, taking out many Seminole villages. John Quincy Adams, our future president, is able to negotiate a treaty with the Spanish that basically gives us Florida as long as we give up claims to Texas, which is kind of funny because in 2 decades we'll just take it anyways. But basically you see this kind of aggressive nature where we're like, we're going to go take Florida, and we do. And so the Adams-Onis Treaty gives us Florida. We do give up claims to Texas, like I said, but we'll eventually get it anyways. So anyways, moving on to more aggressive foreign policy stuff, we see the Monroe Doctrine is declared by Monroe, and basically it says that you know what? European powers, your colonizing days in the Western Hemisphere are over with. This is a land of republics, and Europe should respect that. Now the British support this because that's going to open up more trade for them. So basically, we're the kind of mouthpiece for the Monroe Doctrine, and the British are the muscle for it. So without the British assistance in supporting this claim, the rest of the Europeans probably ignore it. So anyways. Alrighty, so I know I kind of threw a lot at you there. If you have any questions, please tweet me. Or follow me on my YouTube page there, APUSH with Hyde. Also, my website there has all my chapter PowerPoints and also all of the copies of my podcast. So if you want like the PowerPoint slide or the Google presentation slide of my podcast, it's on that website. So anyways, guys, hopefully this helps. See you later.